Oh, joining us live from Sydney is Steve Keen. He's a professor of economics and finance at the University of Western Sydney. Thanks very much for coming in to speak to us. So $4 a banana. Is it just natural disasters that's pushing up food prices in Australia? What do Australia's protectionist policies have to do with the problem? Because I understand that the country bans the import of bananas.
I think this is where economists should keep their nose out of what biologists know, because a lot of those rules about preventing exports of various fruits, like bananas, for example, really are based on the potential to import diseases from other countries. And there's been wonderful cases in the past where people have thought the economists knew what they were talking about, bring in a foreign product and it wipes out the local crop because they haven't got resistance to that foreign disease. So I don't think it's right to blame the quarantine regulations alone and say they should go. It's a popular furphy that economists, unlike me, not including me obviously, push all the time. But fundamentally, if you did that sort of thing, you might get cheap bananas for a while, and then if the disease wipes out your crops that your crops aren't locally capable of taking in, you've got cheap bananas, but you've wiped out an industry, and you're then dependent upon foreign supplies. So I think that's very short-term, typical thinking by neoclassical economists, which I don't support.
Okay, so if you want to maintain biosecurity, does that mean that Australia is now stuck with these rising prices of food? $4 a banana.
Oh, that'll fall. I mean, this is not the first cyclone we've had. In fact, in recent terms, in the last 10 years, we've had 2 cyclones that have wiped out the banana crop, and about a year or so later they recover. Bananas are fast-growing crops. As long as you don't actually lose the trees completely, you can reproduce a crop after the first lot's been stripped off the trees. And it's a temporary blip and it disappears. And what people do in that situation, of course, rather than taking bananas to dinner parties, they don't buy bananas at all. And the sales of bananas plunge, and people substitute with other forms of fruit. Bananas are not an absolutely vital item. If there was something like water and that disappeared, well, you can't substitute water with anything else. But when it's bananas, people make a simple substitution in their budgets, and it doesn't have anything like the impact that it turns up in having in the CPI figures, because, of course, the CPI isn't adjusted on a daily basis, whereas people, when faced with that big a price move, clearly do drop bananas out of their baskets.
That's certainly what's happening. Back to that banana ban in Australia, the issue of biosecurity aside, the WTO, I understand it's overturned a 90-year ban recently on New Zealand apples entering Australia. Might we see the same happening for bananas and other fruit?
It's possible, and economists are always pushing for this. And sometimes it's justified. Sometimes people do use various agricultural quarantine rules as a form of trade barrier. But I think it's fundamentally misguided to see that as the basis of why Australia has it. There's a number of diseases, and particularly fruit flies and other creatures like that, that Australia doesn't have, and a major reason why is strong quarantine laws. And it's very foolish for economists to believe that it's just as simply that apples are apples. Apples in one part of the world have got diseases they've exposed to that give them different forms of resistance, and they can also import those diseases out. They can be benign inside the crop that brings them into this country. They can be deadly in the other country. There's very good biological reasons to have quarantine controls, and we've even got those internally in Australia. I remember as a youth eating a massive number of bananas, as it happens, on the way from a trip between New South Wales and Queensland, because there were quarantine laws to stop you importing bananas from New South Wales into Queensland. It was really about stopping disease spreads between different regions. The biologists know a lot more about this than economists do.
Right, thank you very much for that. We're going to have to leave it there. Steve Keen, Professor of Economics and Finance at the University of Western Sydney.